Israel wants to replace UNRWA with a CIA front group. You've probably seen in the last few weeks that Israel has been making a huge coordinated push to demonize UNRWA, the UN's aid organization for Palestine, saying that they have evidence that 12 of UNRWA's 30,000 workers are members of Hamas, who helped carry out the October 7th counteroffensive. Mind you, Israel hasn't actually provided any proof of this, just a dossier that only the United States was allowed to see and the rest of us are supposed to just take them at their word. But Hamas is also the governing party of Gaza. There are school teachers in Hamas. There are doctors in Hamas. Saying that we should cut off food to Gaza because some of the aid workers are in Hamas would be like saying that we should cut off food to Tel Aviv because every member in the Israeli government has served in the Israeli military, which is actively committing a genocide right now. Israel is using the confusion they've sowed to tighten their stranglehold on Gaza. Israel blocked a massive shipment of flour from entering Gaza, enough to feed 1 million people for a month because they said it would end up with Hamas. But the mainstream media has been uncritically parroting Israel's accusations anyway, which has left much of the public debating and trying to disprove their made-up narrative while they starve Gaza right in front of us. Israel's obviously attacking UNRWA as part of their larger strategy to engineer famine in Gaza. Israeli politicians and generals have repeatedly stated that their strategy is to make Gaza unlivable. Right now, 1 in 4 households in Gaza is facing, quote, extreme lack of food and starvation, according to the Integrated Food Security Phase classification. Many people have resorted to eating grass and animal feed because food is too expensive to buy. But there is another detail of this story that's being overlooked. The Israeli news site Ynet reported last weekend that the Israeli Foreign Ministry has put together a task force that's working on writing up a proposal to replace UNRWA with USAID. The U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, is ostensibly a U.S. aid organization. Their website says, USAID is the world's premier international development agency and a catalytic actor driving development results. USAID's work advances U.S. national security and economic prosperity, demonstrates American generosity, and promotes a path to recipient self-reliance and resilience. Their website has pictures of non-white people smiling and eating food like you'd expect from other Western charities. So what's the problem? Well, USAID is basically an appendage of the U.S. national security state. As long as it's existed, USAID has funded and trained right-wing opposition groups in countries with governments that the U.S. wanted to undermine or overthrow. From its inception in 1961, the agency's Office of Public Safety funded and trained police officers in over 50 countries, propping up right-wing dictatorships around the world. The program came under so much scrutiny because it was linked to so many disappearances that it had to be shut down in 1974. More recently, the agency's leaned into its humanitarian image as a ploy to topple governments, specifically through its Office of Transition Initiatives, transition being the euphemism for overthrowing governments. OTI describes its work as, quote, supporting U.S. foreign policy objectives by helping local partners advance peace and democracy with, quote, programs that serve as catalysts for positive political change. One of its main targets has been Venezuela, where USAID has poured hundreds of millions of dollars into overthrowing its socialist government led by Hugo Chavez. A WikiLeaks cable from 2006 describes the U.S. ambassador's 5-point strategy to, quote, guide embassy activities in Venezuela, specifically from the referendum to the 2006 presidential elections. The 5 points were, quote, 1. Strengthening democratic institutions. 2. Penetrating Chavez's political base. 3. Dividing Chavismo, which is the name of the socialist movement in Venezuela. 4. Protecting vital U.S. business. And 5. Isolating Chavez internationally. The cable then goes on to explain how the U.S. has funneled tens of millions of dollars to anti-Chavez civil society groups through USAID's Office of Transition Initiatives. USAID's attacks on Venezuela only deepened in 2019 during a massive concerted push by the Trump administration to overthrow Venezuela's socialist president, Nicolas Maduro, and replace him with a US-backed puppet named Juan Guaido. The US government's own assessment of USAID's role in Venezuela states that it was to, quote, 1. Support Guaido's legitimacy as the interim president of Venezuela, and 2. Increase pressure on Maduro to step down as president. Accordingly, USAID prioritized aid to the Venezuelan people in coordination with the interim president, meaning Guaido, the fake US puppet. The document even states plainly that USAID's humanitarian program in Venezuela was coordinated with the National Security Council and the State Department. USAID has also made several attempts to overthrow the Cuban government. USAID built Cuban Twitter, called Zunzaneo, a social media platform which they wanted to popularize and then flood with anti-Cuba propaganda. USAID also infiltrated Cuba's underground rap scene in an attempt to try to convince anti-government rappers to try to overthrow the government. USAID even set up a fake HIV prevention workshop in Cuba, calling it, quote, the perfect excuse to identify political dissidents. Bolivia actually banned USAID in 2014 because they claimed that USAID was infiltrating peasant unions and other organizations to overthrow the socialist government in Bolivia. Russia, Ecuador, and Eritrea have also banned USAID for similar reasons. So, what does this have to do with Gaza? The whole objective of Israel's massacre was to destroy the Palestinian resistance as a whole. They thought that if they dropped enough bombs, they could actually destroy the Palestinian people's will to fight back and that they would surrender. But it's been 4 months, and thousands of casualties later, Israel's still nowhere close to defeating the resistance, leaving Israel no choice but to seek out a political solution. This is where USAID comes in. Israel's slander against UNRWA has already caused UNRWA to lose huge amounts of funding to the point where it could very well become non-operational. If USAID were to replace UNRWA in the event of a truce or a ceasefire, USAID could easily be used to deny aid to anyone who supports the Palestinian resistance, which Israel already seems to be doing. Aid could be conditioned on people having to leave Gaza to receive it. Furthermore, if they behave anything like they have historically, USAID is going to throw money and aid around to try to take over Palestinian politics. In essence, this could be a larger ploy by Israel to weaponize humanitarian aid or the reconstruction effort to achieve what it couldn't achieve militarily. But it's also worth remembering that all of the USAID coup attempts that I mentioned earlier failed, because at the end of the day, no amount of money can buy people's trust. It won't make people forget that the US not only enabled this genocide, but financed it. Nothing can wash away that crime.